Welcome everybody to AoMTalk, and this is something we do on a monthly basis, and we invite influencers like Dr. Jay Smith, who we have the privilege of having us join today or this evening, as the case may be. And really our goal is to expose you, our audience, to great presentations on apologetics topics. And our hope is that some of the guests that we have, maybe you haven't heard of much, but we want to connect you to them because we see them as really influencers in apologetics on a number of different topics. So with that, let me pray, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker today and then turn it over to him. So Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for inviting us into your kingdom as your adopted children. Thank you that you died on the cross and rose again to save us from our sins and offer us eternal life. Thank you that you fill us with your spirit and give us a mind to think that we can go and preach your gospel and defend it with great reasons. And Lord, we thank you for this technology that allows us to meet together globally in this way and just share and fellowship, get to know each other, and most importantly, learn more about you so that we can love you more and serve you better. So Lord, we thank you for this time, and we pray in Jesus' name, amen. So we are super privileged to have Dr. Jay Smith as our speaker today. After you see his presentation, you'll understand better why the work that he and his team are doing is so important. And I won't rob any of his thunder, but let me just give you a little bit of background of Dr. Smith. So he is the son of missionaries from India. He was actually born in India, and he has worked with Muslims for over 40 years. My goodness. He spends most of his time traveling all over the world, teaching, researching, writing, producing great content on Christian and Muslim apologetics and polemics. So polemics is a word that sometimes you haven't heard, but if we think about apologetics as defending the faith, polemics is like going on the offensive and really challenging other worldviews. So he speaks all over the place. He's participated in over 100 formal debates with Muslims primarily. And near and dear to my heart, he is the director of a master's in apologetics and polemics to Islam. And I happen to be enrolled in that right now through Veritas International University. That's the background. And again, Dr. Smith, we're so grateful to have you be able to give. I think this is going to be a real condensed version of what I've been privileged to learn through the classes that I've been able to take with you. So take it away, and I give you the floor and the screen.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it's good to have Ben on board. We really enjoyed. He just came into our last course. We have 10 courses that we teach in our MAPI program, Master of Arts in Apologetics to Islam. It is exactly as it is titled. It's a course. It's probably the only one in the world which is live. We do all of our lectures live. Every course has 8 lectures, and so it's 8 weeks, always on Monday nights. And we do it by Zoom, like what I'm doing right now. So this is very familiar for me. This is what I've been doing. I've been doing this since 2014, using Zoom. So Zoom has been fun. It's been great because we get to you. And you hear us. And the great thing about having live lectures is that we can then get your questions, and we can have this back and forth Q&A, which we're going to do in this one as well. Now, as far as apologetics and polemics, you're right, Ben. Apologetics is defense, polemics is offense. It's like a football team, American football. You have 2 completely different teams. They're not even on the field at the same time. They have 2 completely different skills. And apologetics, to be a good apologist as a Christian, you need to be able to defend 2 things. One man and one book. The man is Jesus, and the book is the Bible. To be a polemicist, you need to go the other direction. And that's why on a football team, the offense has different players, different skills. They're the ones that win the game. They're the ones that go forward. They're the ones that are the most famous. They are the ones that have they're the celebrities on any football team. The polemicists are the ones that actually attack the other. Now, to do that, you need to have a completely different set of skills in Christianity. You need to know the other, which means you need to know their book and their man. Their book being the Quran for Islam and their man being Muhammad. So it's a book of the man, book of the man. Really, it comes down to those two things. That's as simple as you can get. I hate to make it so simple, but it really is. Every question we get from Muslims that are attacking us is about Jesus Christ. And every other question we get about that we get from them is about our Bible, the book of the man. Why are we not surprised? Because that really is what really makes us up different from them. Their book and their man is so different than our book and our man. And that's why much of all that we're doing in apologetic and polemic is on those two things. Now, here's the problem. We don't have any school that teaches this. Our school is the only one. There's no other school in the world that teaches Islamic apologetics and polemics. Yet they're the fastest growing religion in the world. They're going to surpass Christianity as the largest religion in just 25 years. And we're not paying attention to this. We're not paying attention. The problem is we have only ever used one methodology, and that is peace and reconciliation. In all of our apologetics, not polemics, you don't see anybody going on the offense. No one wants to go on the offense because it's not very healthy. You won't live very long, especially if you do so in their countries. You'll be thrown out. So therefore, there is no polemics. There is no Islamic polemics that you do as missionaries or evangelists, except, of course, if you're on the internet where you're safe because you don't get killed up there. So that's why we don't have polemics. It doesn't exist. We're the only course that does that. We're the only school in the world that allows that. And we're the only degree that actually certifies that. So knowing that, and since we have been doing that, we realize that we're really getting behind the Muslims on this. They are so good at this. They love polemics. They are brilliant at polemics, and they've been doing it all over the world, and they've been doing it for 1,400 years. We are so far behind the ball that we're trying to do catch up, and that has been a problem. How do you catch up if all you have is peace and reconciliation? The ironical approach, which means making friends, coming alongside them, finding commonality with them, but do not confront them. That's the big thing. Do not confront them. And so that's why, having grown up in India, spent my first 17 years there in northern India, where all the Muslims are. We have 220 million Muslims now in India. It's the second largest Muslim country on earth. I've been born, grew up, I had Muslim roommates, Muslim classmates. In all our discussions in class, we were always engaging. And they were by far the most enjoyable people to engage with because of their passion for what they believed, which we don't have. We don't have the same kind of passion. So in some, Jackson, you need to mute yourself. Thank you. So in some ways, you need to see, by doing with Muslims, you actually learn your apologetics so much quicker, so much faster, because they're asking the right questions. They're forcing us to go back to the person of Jesus Christ and defend him, and they're forcing us to go back to our scriptures and defend it. Brilliant. That's why I don't know why everybody doesn't work with Muslims. They're the best people and the most passionate people to work with. Now, the difficulty is we just don't have the right material. We haven't really brought the right agenda. We're just so far behind them. Knowing that, let me just go ahead and start the PowerPoint, because what I'm going to show you today is a new form of polemics that is just blowing open everything. And I'm going to go really quick. You can see how fast I talk, because all I've been given is 1 hour. Since I only have 1 hour, I'm going lickety-split. Put your pens down. You're not going to keep up with me. I'm giving the PowerPoint to Ben. Ben's going to have it. He will give it to you so you can all have it. So therefore, you can go back and see if what I'm saying. I'm going to go like a railroad train, and you'll go right straight through this material. At the end, you'll get your breath and then start throwing questions at me, okay? But I want you to get a gist of what's going on. It's not going to be intrinsic, or I'm not going to go and unpack everything. Listen, Ben was in my class, my course in the last 3 months, and it took us 16 lessons. That's 30. I mean, it took us 16 lessons. Goodness sakes, over 8 weeks to get through what I'm going to do in 1 hour. All right. So we're going to really compact it. Let's go ahead and let's get right into it. So starting with this idea, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to shut down Mecca, Muhammad, and the Quran. So I'm going to shut down those three in the next hour. see if I can do it. I think I can. Let's go through it, okay? This is the newest research on the historical problems with the origins of Islam. Now, why am I doing that? Well, let's give an introduction. Why in the world are we even asking this question? Historically, we have really sat on the fence on Islam. It is the second largest religion in the world, but quickly will soon become the largest. It is a religion that is not just a private faith. They don't separate what they do, walk, talk, eat, and drink from what they believe. It's an entire way of life. It's a 24/7 religion. Unlike us, we really only practice our religion one day a week on a Sunday morning. Now, I'm being facetious. I know many of you do much more than that. But most people look at us and they believe that's all we do. So that's why we don't really compete with them on that level. What's more, it's not a religion that's over there, that's only in the Middle East. It's now all over the world. Certainly for those of you in the Indian subcontinent, in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, you are the three of the four largest Muslim countries on earth. And if you take your Muslim population in those three countries, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, you are coming up to with 600 million Muslims. There's no other place on earth that has that many Muslims. So it's all around you. Whether you like it or not, you can't get away from Islam. What's more, those of us in the West, places like America or Europe, there are many Muslims coming to our countries, but they don't assimilate very well. They are the least able to assimilate because they bring their religion with them. And the religion is a hygienic code. It's a way of walking, of talking, of dressing, everything they bring with them, and they impose it in the countries they're at. You know I'm right because those of you living in Britain, you know what's happening in Britain. I spent 25 years there in the UK, and this is why I was overwhelmed, and I was trying to wake up the world and say, you cannot change these people. They're going to change you. And you can't change their way of life. They're going to change your way of life. It's happening all over the Western world. Now, we in the church have only ever used a ironic approach, peace and reconciliation, coming alongside them. And that's fine. Keep doing that. But it's not stopping Islam, and we're not getting many converts. We tend to get people who want to be loved, because that's all we're doing. And the people who want to be loved tend to be social misfits. And they're not the best people to go back into their own communities and bring the gospel to them, because they are not the Sauls who become Pauls. That's why God chose Saul for a very specific reason. And Paul, as Paul did more work and got more done than any other one of the disciples, he started churches everywhere he went. He was not fearful. He got thrown into prison, beat up, twice almost stoned to death, caused a riot in Ephesus, and was finally killed in Rome. Where are we getting converts like that? In order to do that, you're going to have to move beyond the peace and reconciliation. You're going to have to move to apologetics and polemics, because that's exactly what Paul did. Look at his ministry. Just read Acts chapter 15 to 19 and look and see what he did in Laodicea, in Cappadocia, in Berea, in Ephesus. Everywhere he went right into the synagogue uninvited. He had no relationship. He did not use peace and reconciliation. He went right up to the Pharisee and he confronted them with what they had done to the Messiah. That is something we don't do. That is something we don't teach, because there is no school in the world that even believes that that's appropriate, except ours. We're the only school that says we've got to go on the offense. And to do that, you got to use apologetics and polemics. Let's go with polemics, because really what I'm talking about today is polemics. Apologetics, you all should know very well. You're all very good versed in how to defend Jesus and how to defend the Bible. But are you good, and do you know how to confront Muhammad and confront the Qur'an? That's what we aren't teaching. Now, there have been three areas of polemics that we have used historically. The first is what we call internal polemics. Internal polemics starts with the idea that you open up internally. You look at Islam internally, which means you take the Quran, you open its pages, you read what is there, and you attack what is there. That's called internal polemics. You look at Muhammad, you look at his life, you look and see what he did with the different people, what he did with his wives, what he did with all those who he confronted, and you attack him and say, is he relevant for today? So that's called internal polemics. That's what I did for 30 years. And that's the only type of polemics we taught, except a second form, which is called cultural polemics. Cultural polemics is when you go and look and see what Muslims are doing in different countries around the world today, and you confront their cultural problems. You look and see how irrelevant what they're doing there is with, say, what's happening in the West, or what's happening here, or what's happening where you live. That's called cultural polemics. Those two polemics are what I have been taught. That's all that I've been using. And that's all I did for the first 30 years of my 40 years of working in polemics. Now we've come across a brand new polemics, and this is what I'm going to teach you today. This is called external polemics. It's the opposite of internal polemics. Rather than opening up the Quran and reading its pages, we don't even have to open up one page. Why would we want to open up a page if the Quran never existed in the 7th century? The external polemics is a historical polemics, and it says there was no Quran in the 7th century. So why are we wasting our time looking and reading it? Why are we wasting our time looking at Muhammad if he never existed? If he never existed, if there was no Muhammad in the 7th century, then why talk about him? Why even deal with him? Let's confront those things. And then we add a third category, and that is Mecca itself. External polemics looks at Mecca, the city of Mecca, where everything happened, where the entire world began, the first place, according to Islam, according to the Quran, where Adam and Eve lived. If that is the case, it should be the greatest city in the history of mankind. We can't find one shred of evidence for any place called Mecca in the 7th century or before. So those are the three areas that you look at in external polemics, all right? Now, confronting the existence of the book, the man, and the place. We confront Mecca. Did it exist in the 7th century or before? We confront Muhammad. That's what I'm going to do today. Did he exist in the 7th century in Mecca and in Medina? And then we confront the Quran. I'm going to end with that. I'm kind of going backwards. Usually I start the book, the man, and the place. I start with the Quran, then I go to Muhammad, then I go to Mecca. But now I've turned it the other way. You'll see why. I'm doing that for a reason. So we're going to start with Mecca. Do that. This form of polemics confronts the very foundations of Islam without confronting the people or their revelation or their prophet, and lowers the anger. I do not get death threats anymore. This has been the easiest form of confrontation, and the greatest thing about it, no one wants to debate it. The Muslims don't know how to debate it. It's not that they don't know how, they can't, because in order to debate these three areas, they're going to have to find evidence from the 7th century. You see the problem? So, knowing that, let's get right into it. Why the external historical critique? Everything we're going to use, our arguments, I'm going to do today is based on evidence from the 7th and 8th century. I'm not going to go beyond that. I'm going to stick to the 7th and 8th century. This way, I'm not arguing from silence, because that has always been the claim. I did a debate in 1995 with Dr. Jamal Badawi, where I gave 10 historical challenges there at Cambridge University. He turned to me at the end of the debate and says, Mr. Smith, you're only arguing from silence. You have nothing from the 7th century to support what you're saying, or the 8th century. And everything that you're saying that I believe is from the 9th and 10th century, but that's still an argument from silence. And the lack or the absence of evidence does not prove the evidence of absence. And he was correct. He had me. He hung me. But that was 30 years ago, 1995. We're now in 2025. We no longer are arguing from silence. You're going to see everything I'm going to use is based on evidence from those centuries. It confronts the very foundations of Islam. Without the book and without the man, there is no Islam. You have to have the Quran. You have to have Muhammad. And what's more, it's neutral. This is a historical critique, which is politically correct. I'm not going to say anything against Muhammad. I'm not going to say anything against the Quran. I'm not going to mock it. I'm not going to say, there's no reason to. They didn't exist. Why even waste my time doing so? So there's nothing that gets people angry. This is not called hate speech. You're going to see it is not Islamophobic. That's why I'm not labeled that way any longer. And it is easy to communicate. Everything I'm going to show you in the next hour is visual. That's why it has become so popular in Fander Films, my YouTube site. I've gone from 20,000 subscribers up to almost 120,000 subscribers in just the last 5 years because of this new material. We have the best and the only antidote, because of the fact that we're the only ones that have an answer to all of these. We are the only ones that have an alternative. This must be our material. This must be our debate. And what we are finding, hundreds coming to Christ that are coming because of this material, and they are Sauls who become Pauls. They are not social misfits. All right. So what are the 4 areas we're going to investigate? Number 1, we're going to start with the problem of the sources. We have to go to the sources to see why this is causing so much problem for the Muslims. Then we go to Mecca, then we go to Muhammad, and then we go to the Quran. So let's do that. Now, there's so much more that I'm not going to say today. Just go to Fander Films and look at all the arguments that are there. They're all displayed there. Yeah, I put up 1 or 2 videos a week. I've been pulling back because of all my traveling in the last few months, but I'll be starting that again. 1 or 2 videos a week, just with all new material that's coming up that we're now researching. So let's see quickly why each area is so potent in polemics. So what are the claims? What are the ones that these are what they claim, not what I claim. This is their standard Islamic narrative. I love that. S-I-N. This is their problem. They have real problems with their standard Islamic narrative. Well, we all have problems with sin, so that makes sense. According to standard Islamic narrative, what they say is this, that Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet, born in Mecca in 570, died in Medina in 632. He is the model for Islam. He is the one that received the Qur'an as his final revelation. The Qur'an is his revelation, set down between 610 and 632. According to them, it is the greatest, the only perfectly preserved and final revelation. It corrects all previous revelations, and therefore Islam is the final religion based on Muhammad's life and sayings, the Sunnah, and on the Quran's teachings. So, conclusion? They believe in one book called the Quran, one man called Muhammad, and Mecca the place. They are completely dependent on those three. Since those three are what's foundational to Islam, we need to investigate all three. But we need to investigate them in the time they existed, that's the early 7th century, and in the place they existed, that is the Hijaz, central Western Arabia. So let's start by looking at the sources and then move to Mecca. Now, sources, what do we talk about? Where did all the stories come from? Where did the history of Islam come from? According to what Islam tells us, look at this map, it all began right here in that brown area. That's Muhammad's empire. That's what existed. That was Islam at 632, just the brown area. And there's Mecca and Medina. That's known as the Hijaz, all right? That's the brown area. Once he died, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali then took over, and they expanded the borders into the orange area. So all the way from Tripoli in the west over to Afghanistan in the east. Once that Rashidun period ended after Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, after Ali was, three of them were killed, and Ali was killed in 661 at the Battle of Siffin. Then the Umayyads take over with Muawiyah, starting with Muawiyah, and they lasted, roughly about 90 to 100 years, up until 750, when the Abbasids took over. And that would be the purple area. Now, I'm not going to spend much time in the purple area today. I'm more interested in the brown and the orange area. Just look at the brown and the orange area. Put that in your mind. Try to memorize this map. Those are the areas that we're going to talk about, okay? So, what do they say? Looking at a timeline of Islam's emergence. Muhammad was born in 570. The Quran is first revealed in 610. The Miraj, when he goes up and suddenly he wakes up in the middle of the night and gets on a winged horse and goes up to Jerusalem, happened in 621. The very next year, he then moved according to their sources, from Mecca to Medina with about 80 to maybe 200 of his followers. And then he was there in Mecca, came down to Mecca and took it over in 630, and then he dies in 632. Now, I'm just giving you the bare bones. This is what they tell us happened, all right? That's Muhammad's life. After he dies, Abu Bakr takes over. He lasts for 2 years. He dies peacefully. Then he's succeeded by Umar, who lasts only 10 years. He is killed, and so there Uthman takes over. He only lasts 12 years. He is killed, but before he is killed, the Quran is compiled, 652. I'm putting that in there specifically for when we get to the Quran. That's the date it was compiled in its present form. After Uthman is killed, Ali takes over, but he only lasts 5 years before he is killed by Muawiyah at the Battle of Siffin. So, conclusion, Islam was fully formed in the Hijaz by 661. That's what they're telling you. I'm not saying that. They're saying that. Now, here's the question. How do we know all of the above? Where does it all come from? Well, you'd think it'd come from eyewitnesses, right? You would like it to come from eyewitnesses. Now, according to the traditions, everything we know about what's going on comes from, well, let's go start with the biography of Muhammad. In order to know who Muhammad was, you need to go to his biography. Now, what Muslims tell us, it was first written by this guy here named Ibn Ishaq. Look when Muhammad died in 632, and look at when Ibn Ishaq died in 765. Did he know Muhammad? No, he did not. He died 130 years after Muhammad, so there's no way he could have known Muhammad. So he's not an eyewitness, all right? That's the first thing. But hold on a minute. We don't get anything from Ibn Ishaq. There's nothing that I can show you that's written by him. We have to go to this guy here, Ibn Hisham. He takes what Ibn Ishaq says. Now, he never knew Ibn Ishaq himself. It's students of Ibn Ishaq that Ibn Hisham uses. And he then writes it down in 833. So Another one that writes down the biography would be Al-Waqidi. Those are the two that write the biography down of what they believe Ibn Ishaq said throughout what they didn't like, and that's the biography we have today. Since we don't have anything for Ibn Ishaq, let's get rid of him. Bye-bye, goodbye to Ibn Ishaq. So what we're talking about is the biography of Muhammad. The first that was ever written down is almost 200 years after the fact. The sayings are much more prolific. And they are first written down by this guy named Al-Bukhari, then also this guy Sahih Muslim, At-Tirmidhi, Majah, Dawud, and Nisai. Those are the 6 compilations of the sayings, what Muhammad said. But look at their dates: 870, 875, 884, 887, 899, 915. These are 9th and 10th centuries, right? That's pretty bad. That's 240 years after the fact. Did they know Muhammad? Not one. Did they see Muhammad or hear him? Not one. Now, there are 2 other genres known as the tafsir and the tahriq. That is the commentaries on the Quran. And the tahriq would be the histories of mankind. They were first compiled by this guy, Al-Tabari. And this is probably the material that most Muslims go to know how to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep. Because it tells you all the traditions, all that Muhammad had started and the early church, the early mosques did. Now, here's the problem. Notice, none of this material is written for 200 years, which means none of these guys are eyewitnesses. I'm going to bring this guy up here, Abdul Malik. He is the first one that actually introduces the name Muhammad, although I'm going to dispute that in about 15 minutes. It's not Muhammad as you think. Nonetheless, he is the one that's credited with introducing the name itself. But look when he died, when he did it, in 692. That's 60 years after Muhammad. And then the Abbasids are the one that actually give us the Muhammad we have today. And they only introduced that in 749. Folks, that's over 100 years after Muhammad. So, conclusion, Muhammad was revealed 84 years after the Abbasids created him, 141 years after he was first introduced, yet 200 years after he supposedly lived. These are all too late. Now, when you compare it with Christianity, everything we get for Jesus Christ, his hadith, his tafsir, his sirah, and his tahriq, those are all the traditions that are in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would be the hadith and the sirah of Jesus. The books, the writings of Paul would be the tafsir, and then the book of Acts, but written by Luke, would be the tahriq. So those, the same genre, the same parallels. When you look and see everything that of what Paul wrote, of what the gospel writers wrote, in fact, the entire New Testament, were written between 15 to 60 years after Christ's death. Everything we know about the tafsir, the tahriq, the sirah, and the hadith of Muhammad are written 200 to 300 years after he died. Which would you guess is more authoritative? I would suggest Christianity. We have a lot more authority. As a comparison, if we had to depend on sources for Jesus comparable to what Muslims are dependent on for Muhammad, Jesus would not begin to appear until the 3rd century. Folks, how could we ever defend him? We could not. But hold on a minute. I just assumed that everything I'm talking about existed. I'm assuming that there was an Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. I'm assuming that there was a Ibn Hisham or Al-Waqidi. I'm assuming that there's an Al-Tabari for these different genres. I'm assuming that these guys, their books we can look at. I'm assuming that they had extant codices that we can go to, right? I made a huge assumption, which is not correct. We don't have one page from any of these guys. Nothing from Ibn Hisham or Al-Waqidi, nothing from Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, or Majah, or Nisai. Not a thing. Nothing from Al-Tabari. We don't have one page from any of them. Now, this is the first time that we're starting to ask us and say, hold on a minute, why don't we have that? If these are the guys, remember, these guys lived in the caliphal courts. They lived in Baghdad. They had all the money they could do. They had all the money at their expense. Their dispensation. They had everything. They had all kinds. They could use manuscripts. They could use parchment. They could use vellum. Unlike our early church fathers and certainly the gospel writers, they wrote on papyrus, on these leaves that disintegrate. Not so the Islamic scholars. They did not write on papyrus. They didn't need to because they were very wealthy. They wrote on parchment and they wrote on vellum, which are animal skins, which would have retained. They've been retained until today. Look at the Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, Vaticanus. Those are written on parchment in the 4th century. They are as good today as the day they were written. So we should be able to find these guys' manuscripts if they're written on skins. And that's the question we've been asking for the last 2 years. So shouldn't they exist today, any of these guys? Therefore, let's go to see where their extant manuscripts are. Now, this is a study done by Dr. Pat Andrews for the last 2 years. This is his material, and this is what he's found. He has looked at the Sirah of Muhammad. He's looked at the Hadith of Muhammad, the Sahaba's codices, which means the ones who are the first generation. They would be the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's of the Quran, of Islam. And he's looked at the Tabi'uns. The Sahaba would be Matthew and John. That would be the eyewitness to what they were writing. And the Tabi'un would be the ones who got it from the eyewitnesses. They would be Mark and Luke, the equivalent in Islam to what we have in the New Testament. And then he has now looked at the Tahriq, which would be all the material that tells you how to walk, talk, eat, drink, and sleep, and the Tafsir, how to understand the Quran itself. He did this, and this is what he's finding. Now, I'm going to do this really quickly. I haven't even put this up on YouTube yet, so that everybody can see. But I'm going to do it all in one timeline. I don't know what those red marks are there. They're going to get in the way. But let's just go ahead and disregard them for now. Now, Muhammad dies in 632. What Muslims tell us, and you'll get this from Muslims all the time, they'll say, we have material from people that actually knew Muhammad. And they usually point to the Sahaba and the Tabi'un. These are the Sahaba and these are the Tabi'un. So that's the Muwatta of Ibn Malik, the Sahifa of Hammam Munabi, the Musnad of Hanbal, the Musnaf of Abdul Razak, the Musnad of Al-Taylisi, and of Abi Shayba. These are the most famous of the Sahaba and the Tabi'un. So we decided to say, okay, if they are the ones that saw Muhammad, they must have been right there living at that time. Not one of them was living at that time. You want to know when their dates are? Let's look at their dates. The earliest is the Muwatta of Ibn Malik, the 9th century. Then comes Munabi, that's 12th century. Then Hanbal, Razak, Taylisi, and Shaiba are all 13th century. Not one of them is from the 7th century. Do you see the problem here, folks? That's 200 to 500 years later. Not one of them is in the right century. So, goodbye. Let's get rid of the guys. They're not there. This has been a lie that Muslims have been telling us because they've not looked at the extant manuscripts. So they say, okay, yes, all right. We do have, however, the hadith, the sayings of Jesus, of Muhammad. And they say that they are written by Abu Bakr, al-Bukhari Sari, by Sahih Muslim, Dawud, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, and Nasai. And they put the dates all between the 9th and 10th century. You can see their dates there. That's what they have been telling us. That is a lie. Not one of them. We don't have one manuscript. We don't have one page, not even one letter from any of these guys in the 9th and 10th century. So when do they begin to appear? When do their manuscripts begin to appear? Are you ready? Here we go. Abu Dawud is 11th century, An-Nasai is 12th century, Ibn Majah is 13th, At-Tirmidhi is 14th, so is Sahih Muslim. And look at Sahih Muslim and Al-Bukhari. The two most famous, the two largest, the two most authoritative are the last. They're the least. They're the ones that are the latest. 14th and 15th century, folks. This is nothing 9th and 10th century. So let's get rid of these guys. Goodbye. We don't need you since you don't belong there. That's hugely significant. Now we get to the Sirah. The Sirah. This is the biography of Muhammad. This is what he did. And we've all been saying that it was written by Ibn Hisham and al-Waqidi. I just got done saying that, didn't I? 10 minutes ago? Do we have anything written by these two characters? Not one thing. So when do we get the Sirah? Well, the earliest we get is a document that is in Fez in Morocco from 1063. That's the 11th century. Then we get one from the British Library. That's the 13th century. Another one that comes from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, that's the 14th century. Another one comes from Chester Beatty in Dublin, that's the 14th century as well. Another one from Paris, the BNF Library, that's the 15th century. And then finally, the most important one, the one that most of it comes from, is a document that is in the SOAS Library in London, and that is the 16th century. However, the biography that we read today, the one that you all read, the one that is translated by Alfred Guillaume, comes from this man here, Wostenfeld, Heinrich Frederick Wostenfeld, who wrote it between 1856 and 1860. That, folks, is the 19th century. He went back to these 6 documents that you see there in green, and he compiled them. He refused to use the one from Fez. He only used 25% of it because he found it much too fraudulent. He put it together, and we have it today from the 19th century, folks, not from the 9th century. We have it put together 1,000 years later. So that's the problem with the Sirah. Then what about, goodbye to the Sirah? What about the last genre, which is the Tafsir, the Tahri? We've been told it was all written by Al-Tabari in the 10th century. No, it wasn't. The earliest documents we have are two documents in Istanbul from the 13th century. There you can see them listed there, but they are not the ones you read today. The Tafsir and the Tahri that you read today were created by a Dutchman. His name is Michael Jan de Heuje between 1879 and 1901. Folks, that's the 20th century. That's just the last century. Well, can you see what's going on here? So, what Muslims tell us, yeah, goodbye to Al-Tabari. Now, what Muslims have been telling us that everything they know about what Muhammad did, what he said, where he went, what he did, all the stories that how early Islam come together within the first 200 to 300 years. That's what they have been telling us. Notice everything's blank there, except for one, the Muwatta of Ibn Malak. What we're saying now is no, none of them come from that time period. They all come from this time period. From mostly the 11th century up until the 16th century, not written until the 19th and 20th century. So conclusion, we've been told that the stories surrounding Muhammad's life were written by those who saw and heard him, thus by eyewitnesses or by others within a few generations. Yet we see above that everything we know about Muhammad, about early Islam, was originally created 200 to 900 years after he presumably lived. Yet we're not canonized into written text until 12 to 1270 years later, suggesting it is nothing more than fraudulent. Now, I'm not saying, don't quote me, I'm not saying that there was not a Sahih Muslim or Ibn Dawud or Sahih Bukhari. I'm not saying there was not an Ibn Hisham or Al-Bukhari, and there could well have been an Al-Tabari. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we have nothing from them. So all that they did write has been destroyed and then rewritten and rewritten and rewritten over the centuries. So it was finally put together. Notice when it was put together. Notice when the final copies. Look at that. That material that you see there on the right is primarily Ottoman period. Much of what we know about Muhammad and early Islam comes from the Ottomans, not even from the Abbasids, and certainly not from the Umayyads. It is mostly from Turkey. Isn't that interesting? Hold on to that. That's going to have huge repercussions. Now, be careful. As Christians, we have the same problem. We have our Gnostic Gospels, 52 found in Nag Hammadi Library. We have the Gospel of Thomas, we have the Gospel of Judas, and we certainly have the Gospel of Barnabas. Now, why is it in your seminary work you never read these Gospels? Well, you do read them, but you're very critical of them. Why are they never accepted? Why are they never put along the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? For one very good reason. They're all 2nd century, 3rd century, and 4th century Gospels. They're Gnostic writings, and they all confront the earliest Gospel writings. They're all way too late. Look at the Gospel of Barnabas, the favorite of the Muslims. That was written in 1634, redacted back to the companion of Paul named Barnabas. Same with Gospel of Thomas and Judas, redacted back to Thomas and Judas. They had nothing to do with Thomas and Judas, and the reason we throw them out is because they are so late. If in doubt, throw them out. And that's exactly why we do that, why you don't read them in seminary. Now, the difference is, while the later Muslim traditions are all considered authoritative, notice they keep the latest ones. They've thrown out all the earliest ones, and they've kept the latest ones. They've done just the opposite. As Christians, we throw out the latest ones and go to the most recent ones because we consider the later ones to be fraudulent. We do just the opposite from Islam. Having known that, let's now go and turn our attention to Mecca. All right? The problem with Mecca. Now, Mecca is everywhere. It's all through the standard Islamic narrative for one very good reason. Mecca is right alongside Muhammad and Qur'an. It's what holds up Islam. Those are the 3 pillars that hold up the stool of Islam, you might say. One leg has about Quran, one leg has about Muhammad, and everything existing in Mecca. So the book, the place, and the man. If you start to attack one leg and it starts to wobble, and finally when you start and you destroy that one leg, the other 2 fall as well. The other 2 absolutely need Mecca. The Quran came from Mecca. Muhammad lived in Mecca, received the Quran for the first 12 years of his life, of his ministry there. So that's why we need to confront Mecca. It is foundational to everything Muslims believe. So let's begin and see what Muslims say about this city, Mecca. And what they say is this. It's the oldest city in history. It's where Adam and Eve were thrown down to. According to chapter 7, verse 24, they're thrown out of the Garden of Eden down to earth. It's traditions that say it was Mecca where they were thrown down to. It doesn't the Quran. The Quran doesn't mention it, the name itself. In the Quran, it says in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71, the Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden place of bowing. Muslims claim that is Mecca, and it says that Abraham built the Masjid al-Haram. They believe that that is the Kaaba. So even in chapter 21, it's referring to Abraham there in that city, though it doesn't say the word itself. Now, according to trade route theories, it was the center of trade. According to Montgomery Watt's trade route theory, north, south, east, and west. So it should be one of the best known and best documented places in history because it's so early and it's been around forever. If you go to traditions, once you get to, well, let's start with the Quran. If you go to the Quran, it doesn't mention the word Mecca except for one time, and that's in chapter 48, verse 24. But it does talk about the Mecca, the earliest sanctuary of mankind. Now, that's not Mecca, I know, but the Muslims claim it is. It's the mother of all settlements, it's referred to in chapter 6 and chapter 42. Not Mecca, it's just the mother of all settlements where the prophet lived. And that Adam and Eve were sent down to this place, though it doesn't mention the name in chapter 7. Abraham lived there in chapter 21. Muhammad was born there, according to the traditions. And of course, according to the Quran, it's where all the Qiblas were formed, chapter 2, verse 149 to 150. Redirected from Jerusalem down to the Masjid al-Haram. It doesn't say Mecca, it says Masjid al-Haram. Now, when you get to the traditions, written much later, and as we're finding from the 11th to the 16th century, Mecca was well known. And so it talks a lot about Mecca. And it mentions in the traditions that it's in a valley with a parallel valley, that Safa and Marwa, where they run back and forth to, that's where the shrines that they run back and forth to as they're doing the Hajj. That it has streams, that it has fields, that it has trees, grass, fruit, clay, loam, grapes, grains, pomegranate. It has olive trees. Folks, this is very fertile. Look at those pictures on the right. Does it look like a place with streams and fields? Does it look like a place that has trees and grass, fruit, clay? Not at all. And those are modern pictures. Even today, well, those aren't modern. Those are actually about 100-year-old pictures. There has never been trees, grass laid down. There may be today because they're bringing in fertile soil. But the native soil cannot accommodate anything. It is most depleted soil on earth. Some of the most depleted soil on earth. According to the traditions, there's mountains overlooking it. That's not so. Look at where the Kaaba is, where the masjid. Look at how far away the mountains are. They're about 3 miles away. And of course, where the pagans raised livestock. Now, Mecca doesn't fit any of these descriptions. That's the problem, because it's in a desert. Conclusion, in the Quran, Mecca is referred to as the place of the prophet, but in the 9th and 10th century tradition, Mecca suggests an author lived much further north. These places don't fit Mecca today, or even in 100 years ago. So let's go to our conclusions. We begin with Mecca because it is foundational for both Muhammad and the Quran. So without it, they both fall. Because it does not matter which Muhammad or which Quran you find. If they are not from Mecca, they are not the Muhammad or the Quran of Islam. Islam is absolutely dependent on Mecca. Since Mecca is the earliest and most important city in the history of mankind, it has to be the center of the world, and therefore certainly the best known. References suggest that Mecca had lush vegetation, such as fruit trees, grass, grains, streams, which make no sense as Mecca has always been in a desert with bad and depleted desert soil. Conclusion number 2. Ironically, though it's claimed to be the greatest city in history, the Quran itself only refers to it once, in chapter 48, verse 24, signifying that the authors either did not consider it that important, or it only came into existence after the Quran was written. Even the Arabic words, endings in the Quran, do not come from Mecca. They are all from the Nabatean Aramaic, which is again situated 600 miles further to the north. Geographically speaking, look at all the references. 23 times to the people of Ad. Look and see where it is on the map on the right. Way up. Look where Mecca is at the bottom. Way up, 600 miles to the north. Thamud, 24 times it talks about Thamud. Again, 600 miles to the north. Midian, 7 times. All of these are way up to the north. Whoever was writing the Quran was not living down anywhere near Mecca. He was living over 600 to 1,000 miles further north. More than that, when you look at the 7th century and you ask what these people called themselves, look and see what they call themselves. They call themselves Ishmaelites in the line of Ishmael, or Hagarin in the line of Hagar. Muhajirun, the people of Hagar. Mahagrites, the place of Hagar. And they were called Saracens by others. Nowhere is there any reference to anyone called Muslims or a religion called Islam in the 7th century. It's too early. That only begins to appear in the mid 8th century in any documentation. Mecca is where Muslims contend that between 70 to 300 prophets were buried all around the Masjid al-Haram. Yet with all the buildings being constructed there, requiring deep foundations, they have yet to dig up even one. And that's why today Saudi Arabians are now cementing up the entire place. Look at all the cranes there. They're building 62 buildings, including the fourth tallest building in the world, that clock tower right there, cementing it all up so that nobody will find any evidence, because even they are skeptical of its history and they don't want the world to find out. Conclusion number 4. When we ask the surrounding civilizations if they have heard of the city of Mecca, not one knows of its existence, including those empires which are situated immediately close by. Look at all those empires, the Romans, the Persians, the Assyrians. Look at the Nubians, the Sabaeans, the Hammadites, the Kindaites, the Qadrianites. Look at them. They're all very close to where Mecca is, right there in the green. Not one of these empires can you find any documentation of any reference to the city called Mecca at all. Now, you might say, okay, because Mecca was pretty insignificant at that time. No, it wasn't. Look at all these cities. Maghrib, Sana, Najran, Taif, Yathrib, Khaybar, Petra, Mamre. They're also insignificant, much more insignificant, and yet there's reference after reference after reference to all of them, but not one word about Mecca. Not at all. So suggesting it was not known. When you look at the trade route through all these towns, through all the towns you see there on the right, all those red stars, you know that they're all located on the Western Plateau. Take a look at this topographical map, the picture you see right there. They're all on the Western Plateau. Mecca is not on that plateau. It's 3,000 feet down below it, proving that it was not on any trade route. Now, conclusion number 5. It was not only on no trade route, it was not even on the sea trade route. Take a look at the map over to the right there. Notice where all the trading, all the boats went. Look at the golden lines. That is where the small boats went. The red line is where the large boats today go. But they didn't have large boats back then. They had small boats that were pushed by the wind. Notice they're all hugging the African coast on the Red Sea. They all went up through the Red Sea, not through the land, because there was no water there in the land. Mecca before 741, which is considered the earliest documentary evidence for its existence. Look at the date, 741. The first time we see the word Mecca on any documentation. This is all discovered by Dr. Patricia Corona, who reads and writes 15 languages. She went to all the trading documents. She could not find any reference until 741. Muhammad died in 632. Over 100 years later, they finally referenced this city. But look where they place it, way up in what is today's southern Turkey, way to the farther to the north. When you look at the maps, all the maps of Ptolemy from the 2nd century, look at he did the geography of Arabia. Look at all the maps that show his geography. Not one reference to Mecca on any of them. Not any of them. So you can see, conclusion number 6, there's a real problem. So why does no one know about Mecca? Just look at this picture you can see right away. Look where Mecca and Medina is. Look where Mecca is specifically. You notice it's in a desert. No desert. If you have no desert, no water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no civilization, no history. That's as simple as it is, folks. It takes me only 2 to 3 seconds to say it. You have to have water in order for a civilization to exist. You have to have water to have trade. You have to have water to have commerce. You have to have water to have civilization. You have to have water to have a history. That's why it's as simple as that. Now, the Muslims will come back to you and say, yeah, what about the Zamzam well? There it is. Take a look at it. That's about 30 feet across and about 50 feet deep. That's what it looked like in 1953 when I was born. Folks, that does not serve. I mean, the Zamzam well, they say, is you can go to any store all over the Muslim world and you will find Zamzam water. And you can go to it provides water for 4 million people during the Hajj. So certainly it is inexhaustible, they say. This is a miracle of God. He is the one that provides it. No, it isn't, folks. If you just follow the pipes that are in there now that show exactly where that water from, you can go up on Wikipedia and you can go up on and zoom it. Just put Zamzam well and look at the pictures of where the water comes from. It comes from pipes. And where do the pipes come from? Just follow the pipes. They go to some big holding tanks. 11 of the largest holding tanks in the world are up there on the mountains above Mecca, all built by United Kingdom. And those pipes, follow the pipes, they go all the way down to Jeddah. And you go down to Jeddah, and what do you find? Desalination plants. This water comes from desalination plants made by Bechtel Corporation, Kansas City, United States. It does not come from Allah. It comes from America, from Spain, and from Canada. We're the ones that create the water that they claim comes from Allah. Folks, they are dependent on modern technology even to keep their Zamzam water. Now, this used to be Queen Zubaydah took care of that problem in 901. She realized that there was no water and built these aqueducts coming from Taif, way up in the mountains, bring water to Mecca. Those finally were in disrepair. They finally ran out of needs, so that's why they had to bring in desalination plants starting in 1926. Now, conclusion number 7. Look at the Qiblas. This is the direction of prayer that everybody prays. Look at the Qiblas of all the mosques and all the temples that exist in the 7th and 8th century. They're all facing Petra or Jerusalem, interestingly. None of them are facing Mecca. The first one that finally faces Mecca is not till 750. If Mecca was there, then why weren't they facing it when Muhammad was living in the 600s? There is no Mecca. There are no Qiblas. The antecedents for the current Meccan pilgrimage, look at the circumambulation that goes counterclockwise, going 7 times, and Safa and Marwa running back and forth between those two. Counterclockwise going 7 times comes from Jericho, and it was what they did in Jerusalem. That's why it's nothing more than a carbon copy of what they did in Jerusalem. Running back and forth to between 2 mountains where Hagar was looking for water comes from Jerusalem. Safa is Sopras, the Mount Sopras, and Marwa is Mount Moriah, where the temple stood. That's the same Masafa, the same Marwa. That's the Arabic equivalent to what we know in Hebrew. So you can see there, this is nothing more than a copy of what was already there. Conclusion? Certainly someone, somewhere, at some time should have known about this city, yet no one anywhere, nor at any time, proving that it never existed at the time of Muhammad, nor during early Islam. So if Mecca did not exist, then where did both Muhammad and the Quran come from? Well, let's look to Muhammad and answer that question. Where did Muhammad come from? Folks, just follow the evidence on the ground. So simple. For the last 1,400 years, Muslims have claimed, oh, did I say 1,400? I'm going to change that in about 5 minutes. For the last 1,200 years, they have claimed that Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet, and that he is the model for Islam, received the Quran. Therefore, everything we know about him, we need to go to his material, 833 of Ibn Shad and the Al-Bukhari. As I've said, these do not come from 833. They are now coming from 200 to 900 years later, and they were compiled in a canonical text in the 19th to 20th century, therefore way too late. That's why we have a problem. We've got to find Muhammad in the 7th century. You just can't find him. Oh, people say that he's there. So let's go back to the 7th century. Let's go back to the time he was supposed he was living. He was born in 570, that's the 6th century, and he died in 632, that's the 7th century. To do that, we need to go to the evidence that is there. There are no manuscripts, all that has been destroyed. There are no documents, all of that has been destroyed. Let's go to those things that you can't destroy. Let's go to coins. Let's go to rocks. Rocks and coins you can't destroy. They are as pristine today as the day they were made because you can't destroy them. That's why you need to go to the evidence. Now, before we do that, we need to look at the name itself, because what we've been looking for is Muhammad. I'm emphasizing the U-A-A, the 3 vowels. Really, that's the reason I'm emphasizing is because if anybody knows anything about Arabic, there were no vowels in the 7th century. So we need to take off those 3 vowels. Now, today, when you look at it, it does have those 3 vowels. In the 7th century, Arabic was very crude. It borrowed its 16 consonantal letters from Aramaic, which borrowed it from Hebrew. So therefore, all they had was 16 consonantal letters. The vowels were not added until the 8th and 9th century. If you look at the earliest manuscripts, you can see that. Just look at the Ma'il, the Samarkand, the Petropolitanus, the Sana, and the Topkapi manuscript. Those are the 5 of the 6 earliest manuscripts. Do you see any vowels on them? Do you see any dhamma and curlicues anywhere? Do you see any slashes above the line or slashes below for the fatha and the kasra? I don't see them. They didn't have vowels, and these are 8th century manuscripts. Every one of these are 8th century. One of them is a 9th century. Can you see why we need, oh, no, they're all 8th century, sorry. That's why we're looking for the wrong word. We're looking for the wrong name. So what does the word Muhammad look like today? That's what it looks like today. Mim, ha, mim, dal, going from right to left. With a dhamma above the mim, a fatha above the ha, and a fatha above the second mim. Do you see that? Very simple. That's what Muhammad looks like. These vowels did not exist. So if they did not exist back then, this is what it would have looked like in the 7th century. Mim, ha, mim, dal. But how do you pronounce that word if you were to look at it? How would you pronounce it? You would pronounce it, well, Mahmud, or Muhammad, right? We should be looking, therefore, for Mahmud in the 7th century, not Muhammad. We're looking for the wrong word. How do we know it's pronounced Mahmud? Well, let's go to John of Damascus. John of Damascus says it very clearly. He writes it in his the heresy of the Ishmaelites, and he writes it in Greek. And in Greek, the vowels are in place. They always have been in place. There it is, right there. I've circled it in red. And it says and from that time now, a false prophet called Mahmud. So he's referring to it. This is written in 730, the 8th century, and he's talking about this Mahmud who sprang up among them. But look at the date, 730. And he's saying it's an Arian monk. An Arian? What's an Arian? An anti-Trinitarian. An Arian monk is somebody who does not believe in the Trinity. So this is someone who doesn't believe in the Trinity. There is John Damascus referring to this character, but look at the date, 730. And then he fabricates his own heresy. We'll get back to that. Hold on to that. So what does Mahmud mean? Well, it means the praised one, or the blessed one, or the anointed one. Even the Messiah is referred to as the Mahmud. Thus, it is not a name, it's a title, introduced by the Ugarites, or as Ugaritic back in 1400 BC, then borrowed by the Hebrews in 1000 BC. It's found in our Old Testament 11 times. Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 16. The altogether lovely one that Solomon is referring to, the Mahmud, there it is. The same 4 letters in Hebrew are also in Arabic. It was subsequently employed by St. Ambrose in the 4th century as a title for Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One. So anytime you see Mahmud in the Old Testament, and now you see Mahmud in any Arabic literature, it is referring to Jesus Christ. From the 4th century, other church fathers employed Mahmud to refer to Jesus Christ. You have Origen in the 3rd century referring to Song of Solomon as the eschatological nuptials of Christ and his bride are present. St. Ambrose then introduces it as a title for Jesus, the Messiah, in the 4th century. So does Gregory of Elvira in the end of the 4th century. St. John Cassian introduces it moving into the 5th century. St. Augustine also introduces the Mahmud as the Messiah in the 5th century, and Apollonius in the 7th century. Now we're in the same century that we're looking at, introduces him as Mahmud. So he was a common title for Jesus by the 7th century in the church and in that part of the world, especially in Arabic. So we should not be surprised when we find it written in many places at that time. But it's not just the Christians, the Jews also considered Mahmud as the anointed one. It's right there in their Hebrew scriptures. Look at this rock inscription on the right. This is from Bir Hima Najran, which is in Yemen today. It's written by Jews, written in Jewish Hammurabic inscription, dating to 523. So this is a good 100 years before Muhammad. And it says, Rabhab Mahmud, by the Lord of Jews, by the Mahmud. You see it there? I'm pointing to it. Boom, boom, boom. There it is there. The Mahmud in Sabbaic script from right to left means the praised one, the anointed one. So you can see it on the inscriptions. It's there. It meant the praised one. Later on, it was referred to as the title, the Messiah, introduced by the Ugaritic and the Hebrews, brought it by St. Ambrose in the 4th century, and by the Jews in the 6th century. So by the 7th century, the Christians used Mahmud to refer to the returning Messiah, while the Jews used Mahmud to refer to the Messiah yet to come, used with all 5 of the exilarchs who were the head of the seminaries there in Hira, in what is today Baghdad. Conclusion, the term Mahmud was well known in that part of the world and at that time, but it was not pronounced Muhammad. That is how we pronounce it today, and that's why there's so much confusion. We're redacting back onto the 7th century what we call him today. That's where our problem is. So, knowing that, let's now look at the coins and see if Mahmud was used in that medium as a title for Jesus Christ. I love about the coins. This is what I love about them, and I'm actually buying them up now because they're durable and they do not disintegrate. They're important. The Lydians introduced them in 600 BC. They were used for more than just commerce. The leaders of anybody who came to power, since they didn't have TV or internet or newspapers or radio, they would introduce their name and their face and who they were on coins, knowing that everybody would be able to touch them. And on the coin, they would always have the image of the ruler to show who he was, and then they would always have the religion of what that ruler belonged to. They would always have the date, and then they would have the name of the mint where it was minted. The problem is the new Muslims today are having difficulties because they're looking at these coins from the 7th century and they're contacting me and they say, these coins make no sense. We cannot understand. When we read the standard Islamic narrative, they don't make sense because the coins don't follow them. So I say, well, stop looking at the Islamic narrative. That was written from the 11th to the 16th century. Why don't you go back to the 7th century and tell me what they say? So they're going back, and this is what they're finding. First and foremost, they find that none of these coins are minted where they're supposed to be minted. They should be minted down there in Mecca and Medina, because that's where Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali were caliphs. That's where Muhammad was a caliph. Why aren't they from there? Why aren't the mints there? Where are the mints? Well, they're all way up here in the north, in Tartus and Hims and Baalbek and Damas, Tabariya, Abiliya, Baisan, Jarrah, Shubna, Amman, and Ilya. That's where we're in the west. The eastern ones are from what used to be the Sassanid mints of Susa, Dash, Bishapur, Iskata, Darabjir, Qura, and Kavad Qura. I'm desecrating the language. Forgive me for those who speak it. So all of these mints would have been under the authority of any Arab leader or caliph in the 7th century from Medina, right, or Mecca. They owned that. They controlled all that land by that time. So every Muslim caliph would have had control over these mints, which means they would have been minting their name and their face and all kinds of description about them. Yet none of these mints are where they should be. They're way too far north. And why are they too far north? One simple word: no water. No water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no cities, no mints. You need to have people and commerce to have mints. That's why there was no mints that far south. I'm kind of starting to sound like a broken record, aren't I? So what should we do since we can't find anything on them that agrees to the Islamic tradition? Let's read what they say. Now, the Islamic traditions assume that all this place was well established by the Muslims, by the rightly guided caliphs from 624 to 661. So there should be some evidence on these coins about Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and certainly Muhammad himself. Something Islamic, at least one thing that's Islamic. So, where are the Islamic coins? Notice that all of these are all due to, and let's look right at the coins. I'm not going to go into all that. Let's look right at the coins. So using a timeline, Muhammad dies, not one Islamic coin. We can't find any coins from 632 up till 651 that is Islamic. That's the Rashidun period, 624 to 661, to be more precise. When you look at the Sassanid Empire over to the east, these are all Arab coins again. They either are Christian or they're Zoroastrian, but what's interesting is when you look at the coins, take a look carefully, you'll notice that there are crosses on them. See where the four rectangles are? Red? Those are the crosses. By the way, whenever you look at a coin, we always show two images, the front and the back, front and the back, front and the back, okay? The letter M, it means 40. That's how much that coin is worth. Now, when we get to Mu'awiyah of all people, he should be a Muslim because all the Muslims tell us he is a Muslim. He's the first caliph of the Umayyad Empire. So certainly something should be on his coins. But take a look at his coins. These are my coins. The one on the left, is mine. And notice that's his image. What's he holding in one hand and in the other hand? A cross and a cross. What's above his head? A cross. Look on the back side of the coin. There's another cross. 4 crosses on the front and back of that coin. Look at the one on the right. I'm going to come back to this. Hold on to this. This is the most damaging coin because that's Mu'awiyah. This is minted in 663, continues to be minted up until 669. And notice there is Mu'awiyah with crosses on his head and the letter M with a cross above it. How do we know he's a Christian? Well, it looks pretty clear he's a Christian because of the crosses. Let's look at something else. Let's look at this inscription. That's an inscription in Taif, the dam there, and it's a picture, and it's absolutely interesting because this is created by Mu'awiyah. There's his name right there, but his name is in Greek. Why would it be in Greek if he's a Muslim? Obviously, because the Christians write in Greek. There's his name, Mu'awiyah. And it says Amir al-Mu'minin. I'm sorry, it says Abdullah, right below, next to it, Abdullah Mu'minin. And then it says Amir al-Mu'minin. Abdullah means slave of God or servant of God. Remember, Allah is the word that is used, the name that is used for all the religions in Arabic. So this is in Arabic, but it's written in Greek. And then it says Amir al-Mu'minin. That means commander of the believers. What are the believers? Ooh, boom. There's a cross. So obviously he's a commander of the Christians, proving that he's a Christian. If that is the case, then let's look back at this coin again. And what do we find below the M? Let's go. Boom. Notice what I've just circled. Mim, ha, mim, dal. There's the 4 letters we're looking for. Mahmad. There's the Mahmad on the coin. So if he's a Christian on both the front and the back, and Mahmad is there, who do you think that's referring to? Muhammad? No. This is the anointed one. This is Jesus Christ. This is all over the inscriptions. It's over in the rock inscriptions. It's also on the coins. That's why we're not surprised. So it's obviously that Muawiyah is a Christian. He rules all the way up until 680. After him comes the Marwans. The Marwans then are introduced by Marwan himself. His son is named Abd al-Malik, who's probably the greatest of all the Umayyad caliphs. And he comes to power in 685, rules to 705. Now we begin to see a shift in the coins. This is the coin that he's supposed to be paying tribute with, a tribute to the Byzantines. And there's a picture of Heraclius with his two sons holding crosses, and there's a cross, and the backside is the Byzantine cross. He then introduces this coin, which caused huge amount of anger, because he takes the crosses off the orbs, and he puts on the backside, we still see there's no Byzantine cross there. He puts the denomination of what it's worth. But that causes Justinian II to go to war with Abd al-Malik. He goes to war with Abd al-Malik because he's so angered by this coin. Abd al-Malik wins the war and then introduces this coin here. Now, we used to think that this is actually Abd al-Malik himself holding a sword. I'm going to be putting up a video this week that actually confronts that. It's not, that is not Abd al-Malik that's on the front of that sword, of that coin. Guess who's on the front of that coin? Well, you're going to have to wait till I actually put the video up, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now. If you look at the sword, if you look at the robe, if you look at the tassels, and if you look at everything that's on, the symbolism is about Jesus Christ. That is Jesus Christ on that coin, holding the sword, showing that he is winning that battle against Justinian II. And what does he write around the outside? Look at all the Arabic. Say not three, for God is one and he has no son. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is only one God but God. And Muhammad is the servant of God. This is an attack against the Trinity. It's an attack against Byzantine Trinitarianism. It's an anti-Trinitarian Arian attack. He then introduces this coin in 696. He takes off the image of Christ and puts on all these references. Everything is against Jesus. Say not three, for God is one. He has no son. For God does not begetteth, nor is he begotten. La ilaha illallah, for there is only one God but God. And the Muhammad, this is the Muhammad that everybody's waiting for. This is the Muhammad that the Jews and the Christians are waiting for. The Muhammad, the Messiah, to return again, or to return the first time. And what do you say? The Muhammad, your Muhammad, is nothing more than a servant of God. This is an anti-Trinitarian attack. Just read the coins. These all suggest that there is an internecine clash between the different sects within Christianity, the Trinitarians, represented by Justinian II, versus the anti-Trinitarians, represented by Abd al-Malik, with the later establishing its own religion at the end of the Umayyad dynasty in opposition to Christianity in the mid-8th century, which then morphed into the Islam of today during the initial 100 to 200 years of the Abbasid dynasty in the 9th to 10th century or even later. Now, what about the rock inscriptions? They follow exactly what we're finding with the coins. When you look at the rock inscriptions, you notice that they are important because they do tell us exactly what is going on. When you read them, you need to see what they're saying. And what you will notice is that where they're located all in the north and all in the south. Why in the north? Why in the south? And not in the between? The ones in between were from the 9th and 10th century. On the 7th century, rock inscriptions are in the north and the south. The reason is because there's no water in the middle. That's all desert. You've got to go where the water is. Boy, I'm getting redundant. When these rock inscriptions are in the north and the south, one would expect the name of Muhammad to be in these inscriptions. Again, these are the Hajj routes. Yet they all contain this Sabbaic script. I'm sorry, the inscriptions all contain the non-Sabbaic script. They contain the Nabatean Aramaic script that you see up in the north. How do we know that? We're going to get into that when I get into the Quran. So they're all containing the wrong script. Even the Quran itself is containing the wrong script. We saw that earlier. We're going to get into that later. The most famous one is this one that I showed you already, showing that it is a Christian inscription, not a Muslim. The conclusion, this inscription clearly proves that Mu'awiyah was indeed a Christian, which helps us now understand why he is holding a cross on the coins on the far left, which he minted in the same period as he made this inscription there. Now, Al-Qalimsin is the one who really does the most on the inscription. He is the one has looked at over 10,000 of these rock inscriptions between 640 and 740. Prior to 690, he says there's no evidence of anything Islamic at all. So up until the end of the 7th century, this is 60 years after Muhammad, nothing about Islam on any of these inscriptions. Just formula, regular formula. Then after 690, you start seeing the word Muhammad appear, which makes sense because it's appeared on the coins of Abd al-Malik in 692. That makes sense that it's appearing on the inscriptions. But it's not Muhammad, it's Mahmud, the anointed one, the praised one, the altogether lovely. From 710 to 720, then you start to see the pilgrimage and prayer and fast. This should be there 100 years earlier. It only begins to appear on the inscriptions 100 years too late. Finally, in 720 to 730, you see the word Muslim and Islam, referring to a specific group in contradistinction or against Christianity. Conclusion, it was only in the 730s onwards that there is an evidence of popular devotion to Muhammad as the prophet and messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions absolutely awkward. Furthermore, there is 100-year silence prior to this that indicates that Islam did not exist as a distinct religion until long after the time of Muhammad, which casts doubt on whether he had any part in starting it. Now, wait a minute. There are references to Muhammad other places as well, besides rock inscriptions. We need to go to those other places. Now let's look and see what they find in the documentary evidence. Look at the Quran. 4 times Muhammad is found in the Quran, not Muhammad. It's always Muhammad on the earliest manuscripts. Chapter 3, verse 144, and the anointed one is no more than a messenger. Well, that's Jesus. Chapter 33, verse 40, the anointed one is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah. Jesus never had any children, so he's not the father of any of your men. He is the last of the prophets. There's no one that comes after Jesus. That's in chapter 33, verse 40, referring to Jesus again. Chapter 47, verse 2, believe in that which is sent down to the anointed one. Who do you think the anointed one is? Well, that, of course, is Jesus. In chapter 48, verse 29, the anointed one is the messenger of God. Allah is the name for God in Arabic. So in all 4 cases, it's referring to Jesus, the anointed one, as we noted earlier with the Mahmud. So this is not the prophet for Mecca at all. Then Muslims cannot use the Quran to support Muhammad in the prophets or the prophet's existence in the 7th century. And one of the foundational pillars of Islam begins to fall. Let's look at the Dome of the Rock, built in 692 by Abdul Malik again. It has all these inscriptions right in the inner ambulatory, the only original part of the building. And take and read the inscriptions. They're right there, built in 692. They say over and over again that they attack Jesus, they attack the Trinity, they attack his sonship. For there say not 3, for God is one and he has no son. Later on, that gets introduced into chapter 4, verse 171 of the Quran. For he does not begetteth, nor is he begotten. That later on gets introduced in the Quran in chapter 112. And then you have the Shahada. This is the first place you see the Shahada written down. And it's La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, for there is no God but God, and the Muhammad is nothing more than the servant of God. Same conclusion, Muslims cannot use the Dome on the Rock like they cannot use the Quran. For Muhammad's existence in the 7th century, and another foundational period of Islam begins to fall. What about the other references? Muslims claim that there are 12 references, but only 5 of them actually refer to Muhammad. In 634 AD, you have Thomas the Presbyter, who writes about the Tayyaya de Muhammad in Gaza. 2 problems. First of all, Muhammad is the Persian way of spelling Muhammad, not with a D, but with a T. So he's from the Tayyaya, who are in northern Iraq. I don't recall Muhammad ever living in northern Iraq. He didn't come from northern Iraq. Way too far to the north. So you've got the wrong Muhammad again. Looks like this is nothing more than Jesus Christ. Then you have the flyleaf 636. The Arabs of Muhammad killed many Syrians in Yarmouk. Way up in Jordan, I don't remember ever Muhammad going and living way up in it's in Syria, not Jordan. He was in southern Syria, north of the Dead Sea. And then you have in 660 Sabaeus, referring to an Ishmaelite called Muhammad, with 12,000 Israelites attacking the Byzantine. There's no record of 12,000 Arabs partnering with Jews anywhere in any 20 Israelites attacking Byzantine anywhere. This is probably a Jewish exilarch that they're referring to as the Muhammad. And then you have John ben Bar Penkaya in 690, referring to Muhammad as a teacher, leader of the Arab. Again, way too far north, again, suggesting this is the wrong Muhammad. And then probably the most exciting is John Damascus, who does refer to Muhammad, even spells it out for us in Greek so we know how to refer to it and to pronounce it. And he talks about this Muhammad, this evil prophet who has ludicrous doctrines. And he talks about 4 books that he has. The book of the cow, which becomes Surah 2 later on. The book of the women, which becomes Surah 4 later on. The book of the table, which becomes Surah 5 later on. And the book of the camel, which becomes Surah 0. There is no Surah in any Quran named the camel. So you can see these are 4 books of a Quran that has yet to exist. These predate the Quran because the Quran is 1 book, not according to John of Damascus. And look what he titles his book, The Heresy of the Ishmaelites. This is an Ishmaelite heresy. Hold on to that. Every reference to Muhammad in the 7th century places him in Gaza, Jerusalem, Damascus, or Hira, which are all situated too far north, folks, and probably refer to another Muhammad, the anointed one or the praised one. So I won't get into conclusions. I just want to end with this. You can read the conclusions for yourself. All this suggests that there was this clash that was going on between different sects within Christianity. On one side, you had the Trinitarians, that's the Byzantines. On the other side, you had the anti-Trinitarians, that are the Arabs, the Umayyads, who are headed up by Abd al-Malik, a true anti-Trinitarian. With the latter, Abd al-Malik establishing its own religion at the end of the Umayyad dynasty. This comes after him, his sons that come after him, in opposition to Christianity, and then morphed into what is Islam today, possibly during the Abbasid period. I might even suggest this may even happen after. Nonetheless, let's stay with the Abbasid period, somewhere between the 9th and 10th century, or even later. So, that's the problem with the place and the man. Let's go to the book. What the Muslims claim. Now, they claim 4 things. The Quran is uncreated. That's in chapter 85, verse 22 of the Quran, makes that claim. The Quran was sent down to Muhammad between 610 and 632. The Quran was completed by Uthman in 652, and the Quran was unchanged. Those are the only 4 things they claim about the Quran that you need to know. Uncreated, sent down, completed, unchanged. I'm going to come back to those 4 right at the very end. So hold on to those 4. Just 4 words you have to remember. Uncreated, sent down, complete, and unchanged. All right? Now, according to what Muslims say, here's what they say.
Our claim, the Muslim claim, has been for the last 14 centuries that the Quran is absolutely word by word preserved. Word by word.
And frankly, the Quran has been preserved, we believe, word for word, letter for letter.
So the Quran has been preserved to the letter, to the dot, and to the sound when we talk about this.
Their Quran is exactly the same. The Quran shall remain uncorrupted, untouched, and unchallenged until the day of judgment.
Quran that we read is exactly the one that was given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Word for word, letter by letter, surah by surah.
It was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ and preserved word by word, letter by letter, harf by harf. Even the pronunciation is preserved.
Okay, can you see they're all saying the same thing? So why do they make these claims? Folks, don't blame them. The Quran makes these claims. In chapter 85, verse 21 and 22, it talks about the preserved tablets. Every exegete considers these to be the eternal tablets. In chapter 10, verse 15, and also in chapter 18, verse 27, that no one can change it. Not one can change his words. So that's why it cannot be changed. Why? Because Allah will guard it. It is guarded by Allah in chapter 15, verse 9. So the Quran makes these claims. Muslims therefore have to give lip service for them. Not one word, not one letter can be changed because it's eternal. If it's eternal, no man can touch it, and it's guarded by Allah. So we would not make those 4 claims. Please don't say that about the Bible. We know it was created. We know who wrote it. It was not sent down, written by men living on earth. It was inspired, yes, but not what every word, not every letter. We know it was complete when it was written down, but we don't have the originals. Has it been changed? Well, that's a huge debate going on in Christianity. I'm not going to enter in that debate today. So we would not make those 4 claims. My remit today, then, therefore, is to find one Quran dated in the mid-7th century that is complete with all 114 surahs and unchanged. Not one word, not one letter has changed. That's what we need to find. Makes our job very easy, folks. How do we know this? Well, it all comes from Sahih Bukhari, who wrote this according to them in H70. We now know that he doesn't write until the 15th century. So he's writing a good 800 years later. Now, the 7th century Qurans, according to them, this is what Al-Bukhari says. Okay, I'm just going to use his story, all right? Al-Bukhari, and this is why Muslims only know this story, because they go to him. They say that Uthman was the one that first wrote it down in its final form. And he sent one copy to 5 cities. There they are: Mecca, Medina, Basra, Baghdad, and to Damascus. Now, according to Al-Bukhari and others, suddenly then around the end of the 7th century, another Quran starts to appear in Damascus, written by Ubay ibn Ka'b. It has 116 surahs, 2 surahs too many. Another then appears in Baghdad, written by Ibn Masud. It has 110 surahs, so 4 surahs too few. And then a third one appears written by Ibn Musa in Basra. Though it has 114 surahs, it has 15,000 differences. So Zayd ibn Thabit is the one that becomes then the canonical one that supposedly we have today, right? But already within the 7th century, you're already getting differences. Up to 12,000, sorry, did I say 12,000? 15,000 differences. So there are at least 5 Qurans in the 7th century from Medina, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We do not even have one of them today. Not one of them exists. We can't find any of those 5. But then something happens. Between the 7th and 8th century, the Qira'at Qurans begin to be introduced. What exactly are we talking about? What are the Qira'at? Now remember, the Arabic that is all from much further north, the Arabic that we use today. It's Nabatean Aramaic with only 16 letters. That means it only had the razm back in the 7th century. And that the problem is no one can know what they were reading. You can't read it. Today we have 28 letters because we have now 5 dots and 3 vowels have been added to it. So in the 8th century, these dots, known as ijabs, and these vowels, named al-haraka, were introduced so that people could read them and understand them. If you look at these 2 pages of the Samarkand and the Sana, there are no dots. You don't see any dots there, and there are no vowels. Yet these are the earliest manuscripts of the Quran that we have. Today, there are 28 letters, but 6 of these letters don't need dots. The Alaf, the Kaf, the Lam, the Mim, the Nu, Ha, and the Waw. Okay? So those don't need dots. The others do. What do I mean by dots? Well, if you put 1 dot above it becomes a na or an an. 2 dots becomes a ta or a t. 3 dots becomes a tha or a th. 1 dot below becomes a ba or a b. And 2 dots becomes a ya. So now you have ta, tha, tha, ba. You have 5 different letters just by one little bold-shaped smile, which most letters are in Arabic. Then on top of that, you have 3 vowels. You have the dhamma, which is the u, which is the curlicue above the letter. And then you have a fatta, or kasra, sorry, which is the e sound, which is below the letter. And then you have a fatta, which is the a, which is a slash above the letter. Now, if you take these 5 dots and 3 vowels and put them to 3 smiley faces, one after another, which is common, these are common words, you can get 19 different words just from 3 smiley faces with different dots and vowels, all of which are different. That's just why you need the dots and vowels. The problem is, almost immediately, people start putting their dots and vowels where they wanted to. And so you had some person, a guy named Nafi, who put his dots and vowels where he wanted to in Medina. Another guy named Ibn Kathir in Mecca, he put his dots and vowels where he wanted to. Another guy named Abu Mamar, who lived in Basra, he put his dots and vowels. And Abu Amir put his dots and vowels in Damascus. And then 3 different guys named Asim, Hamza, and Qasai, they're in Kufa. They were neighbors of each other. They didn't look at each other. They put their dots and vowels where they wanted to. And then they had students that would come and study under them. And the more students they have, the more important they became. And so they almost had schools of different dots and vowels. This became such a problem that by the 10th century, by 936, there were over 700 of these Qurans. So a guy named Ibn Mujahim was commissioned to just choose 7, and these are the 7 he chose: Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Amir, Asim, Hamza, and Al-Qasai. But look at the dates they died: 785, 738, 770, 736, 745, 772, 805. These are all 8th and 9th century, right? And what's problem is those 7 became the official 7 Qurans that were used in Mecca, Medina, Basra, Damascus, and in Kufa. So 3 of them in Iraq, 4 of them in Iraq, 2 in Arabia, and 1 in Damascus. The problem is this book that I have in my hand today. This is the one that's used all over the world. 93% of the Muslims memorize this Quran. This is called Hafs Quran. Do you see that name there? That name's not there. Hafs is not in that list. So there was a problem. They needed more names. They needed more Qurans. So in the 12th century, in 1194, a guy named Al-Shatibi was commissioned to take 2 students from every one of these 7, and he chose them by choosing who were the most popular ones, the ones who had the most students. He didn't open up 1 page or read 1 word. He just chose the most popular ones, and he chose these 14, 2 from the 7 on the left. So now you have 14 new ones added in the 12th century. Now you can see Hafs. And do you see Warish at the very top there? He dies in 812. Hafs dies in 796. So this is the late 8th century and early 9th century. Hold on a minute. That's still not good enough. By the 15th century, in 1429, another man named Al-Jazari was then chosen to choose 3 new more readers and 2 students from every one of those 3, which means 6 transmitters. So he chose another 9. So you have the first 7, then you have the next 14, and then you have the next 3, followed by the next 6. 7, 14, 3, and 6. Now you have 30 different Qurans by the 15th century, by 1429. 30 different Qurans. Here's Hafs right there. He has become the standard today. In 1985, they chose him as the standard. That's only 40 years ago. How much difference are there between the other 29 and his? We counted 93,000 different words, 93,000 different meanings. Ooh, Dr. Shadi Nasa at Harvard University has now put it over 100,000. He has counted over 100,000 different words. Now, can you see why this is a problem? If you believe not one word, not one letter has changed, the Quran is always the same. It is eternal. It's always existed in heaven. Nobody, not one person can change it. Not one word can be changed by humans. And that Allah himself guards it. What are you going to do with what you see in front of you right here? So my colleague Hatun Tosh went to all over North Africa. She went to Jordan, to Yemen. She went to also in Morocco, and she found these 26 Quran. These are 26 of the 30 that I showed on the graph. That's Hatun Tosh there. She found 26 of these Qurans by 2016, brought them back to London and showed me them. And so we decided to take them to Speaker's Corner. But before I get to that, let me just show you what we're talking about. You say, are they really different? Yes, they are. Here's chapter 3. In fact, I won't go into this because I realize I'm running out of time. You can go and just compare the left with the right, the Hafs with the Warsh, the Hafs with the Warsh. Qatala versus Kutila, fought versus were killed. Well, I'd like to know. I'd like to fight but not be killed. So you can see that has huge difference. Slaves versus in the presence of God. Are you slaves of him or are you in his presence? I'd like to be in his presence, not his slave, thank you. Are you doing good or are you beautiful? Well, if I have 3 sons, and I would rather them being doing good rather than beauty. And this one, I'll just look at this one because this one really has an impact on us, theologically speaking. Indeed, they who disbelieved among the people of the scriptures, that's us, and the polytheists, will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally there, and we are the worst of creatures. But according to Warsh, we are amongst the innocent. Now, hold on a minute. If we're innocent, what are we doing in hell? That's a theological problem, and that's also a practical problem for us as Christians. And can you see why this has huge ramifications? So these change the theology and the doctrines. We took them down to the Speaker's Corner. I'm not going to show you the video. We held them up for the whole world to see in 2016. That caused such a furore. There was a man there you can see on the right there with a beard. His name is Muhammad Hijab, one of the largest men on the internet today. He was right there watching this. He immediately left the audience, said, "Come to me. Don't look at what they're showing you. Don't listen to what they're saying. I will explain it." This is June of 2016. 4 years later, he could not explain it. So 4 years later, he had to go to this man here. That's Muhammad Hijab on the left. And he had to go to Yasser Qadi, the world's leading authority on the Qira'at in the Ahru. And he put out his hand and he said, in an interview, a YouTube interview that I was watching live, he put it out and he said, "Okay, I'm putting out my hand. This is a blank sheet of Mus'haf. Which Quran are you going to write? Is it Hafs? Is it Warsh? It's Qalun?" He started naming, and before he could finish his sentence, Justice Qadi said, "Do not answer me this question. Turn off the camera. We do not talk about this in public." So Qadi says, the Afruf and the Qira'at are the most difficult topics for scholars. You do not tell new converts about this. And only with the most advanced do you deep dive to talk about this issue. For the last 1,000 years, this has been the most difficult problem for Muslim scholars. Muslims, he said, have a respect, and he held up the Quran. He says, we have a respect for the Quran. We put a red line beyond which we don't go. We don't go beyond that red line. But he did his doctoral thesis at Yale University where there are no red lines. And suddenly he was introduced to this and he had no response to it. He said, he turned to Muhammad Hijab and said, "Your standard narrative." What narrative? Standard Islamic narrative. That's why we use SIN now. "Your standard Islamic narrative has holes in it." And he said it there on June 8, 2020, 5 years ago. Western academics, he said, have jumped leaps and bounds on this issue, and they're looking at the rest of us like the emperor with no clothes. He said, "I've never lectured on this subject, though I did a doctoral thesis. In the last 25 years, you won't hear me talk about it once. This subject should never be brought up in public." Finally, Muhammad Hijab asked him again, I need an answer. I have to answer. Which Quran are you going to put into it? Finally, at the very end, he said, okay, you're pushing me. And then he says, they're all the Quran. A little bit of Hafs, a little bit of Walsh, you just mix them around, and that's the Quran you get today. And I started clapping. Now, because of that interview that he did in 2020, June 8th, within 2 weeks, I was looking at all the comments, and there were hundreds and hundreds of comments. That's a good thing about YouTube. You can write comments. And they were writing, Muslims after Muslim, were saying, "I have now left Islam because of what you have said. You are one of the ones that have told us not one word, not one letter has changed." You saw the video. I showed you him saying that. Not one word, not one letter has changed. And now you're saying there are thousands of differences, up to 93,000. So within 2 weeks, they had to shut down all the comments. Within 2 months, by August of that year, they completely deleted that interview off both of their YouTube sites. But I have it, and I can give it to Ben, and you can have it too. And every June, I'm going to do it next June, I bring back up that problem again to let the whole world know what is happening with his Qurans. Now, when you look at the earliest manuscripts, I want to go real quickly now because I'm almost out of time. These are the 6 major manuscripts. I did a debate on these 6 back in 2014, 11 years, and shut down the Quran using Dr. Brubaker's material, Dan Brubaker's material. When you look at these manuscripts, you notice this one on the left is the top copy. That's the best one they have. That is about 99% of the Quran, but it has 2,270 manuscript variants, and it is dated to the mid-8th century to maybe even the 9th century. So it's much too late. It's 100 years later. It's using the Eastern Kufic script. The one on the right is the Samarkand. That is in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. That only goes up to chapter 43. And of the 43 chapters, 16 are missing. Only one is complete. It has so many grammatical errors that it looks like it was written by 5 different scribes who didn't know Arabic very well. That's why they don't use it anymore. That one, oh, by the way, that one is dated to 720, so it's 8th century as well. This is the Ma'il one, which is in the British Library. It only goes up to chapter 43 as well. It's written in a much earlier script called the Ma'il script, slanted script, but it has hundreds of manuscript variants. What's interesting, it's missing much of the Quran, and it's dated to 790, the late 8th century. The one on the right is the Petropolitanus. It only has 23% of the Quran. Much of it's missing. And of the 23%, there are 93 manuscript variants. That means words and phrases that are different in that Quran than the Quran we use today. The Cairo manuscript, the Al-Huzaini in Cairo, that is a 9th century manuscript. It's a monumental text. It has hundreds upon hundreds of coverings. We're going to show you some of them that are censoring the text because it does not agree with the Quran that we have today. And then the one on the right is the most exciting, the Sana'a manuscript, discovered in 1975. If you look at the 2 pages that I'm showing you there on the right, it goes up to chapter 19, then it jumps to chapter 22 at that yellow mark. On the left side, chapter 20 and 21 start to appear. And there are 60 to 70 years between those 2 pages, showing that this is an evolving text. It is dated to 705 on the right side. The left side is dated to the late 8th century. When you see those orange marks, every one of those orange marks is a manuscript variant. That means 1,000 of these words are different than the Quran we have today. So all the earliest manuscripts, when you look at them, a summary, none of them are from the 7th century. None of them are complete. None of them completely agree with each other. None of them completely agree with the current 1924 Hafs text. All of them have hundreds and even thousands of subsequent manuscript variants. So when was there a complete Quran? Dr. Dan Brubaker is the one that's done this most damage on looking at these manuscripts, and he went and did his doctoral thesis in 2010 to 2004. 2014, I'm sorry, he finished. And he has found all these differences. These are razm. There's no dots and vowels in any of these. These are the earliest manuscripts that I just showed you. Notice they only have consonantal text. Here you can see insertion. Can you see where words have been inserted over the line? Why have they been inserted? Because they now follow and support the Hafs text. Here you see erasures. They've just erased letters and words. Why have they done that? Because now they support the Hafs text. Here you see erasures overwritten, or they're erasing and they're writing over top. Why? Because what's written over top now supports the Hafs text. Here they are writing, they're not even caring about erasing. They just wrote over top so that it supports the Hafs text. And here are these coverings I was telling you about. Look at the middle one. There are 8 different coverings there, so that what's left just look like chicken scratches, but it now supports the Hafs text. Selective coverage overwritten, supporting the Hafs text. And here are tapings, again, supporting the Hafs text. We went down to Speaker's Corner to introduce this book, and this man on the right there, he did, Mansour Ahmed, probably the world's leading authority on the manuscripts, got on the ladder next to us and tried to confront us on the manuscripts. And he made the claim that we don't need to have the earliest manuscript. We have 97% of the Quran by 720, by the 8th century. I said, what? Where do you find these 97%? What manuscript are you talking about? I went up to his website, and that's what he has. He has 63 fragments of manuscripts, which now support 97%. But what he didn't know is that we were going to go check him out on that. So we checked him out on every one of those fragments, and notice some of those are just 1 or 2 verses long to get the 97% of the Quran. 30 of those, the ones I'm just putting up right now with the green arrows, no one, people have studied them, but they have only come up with tentatively dating. With so many disagreements, he should not have used them because no one disagrees on them. 9 of them, including the largest one and the 5th largest one, are all dated after 720, after 719. So therefore, he should never use them. And the remaining 34, the red arrows going up, all of those, no one's done any work on. Not one person has studied them. So why is he making the claim? He's making the claim because he needs them to get 97% of the Quran. So really, when you look at all this 20 plus 9 plus 34, when you look at all the ones that he has listed there, none of them are really valid, since all of them are either late or tentative or have no supporting evidence. Throw away. So when was the Quran, when was the Hafs Quran chosen? When did we get this Quran that we have? It was chosen in 1924 in Cairo because they had 30 different Qurans that would be brought to high school schools, and high school students were giving 30 different answers. So they went to a guy named Muhammad ibn Ali al-Husaini al-Haddad from Al-Azhar University to choose one, and he chose the Hafs text. They took the other 29 that disagreed and threw them into the Nile River. But that wasn't good enough, because when they looked at the Hafs, they had to make 7 revisions. So by 1936, they finally got the Hafs text they wanted, and they recommissioned it, and they made it official for all of Egypt. So all the schools in Egypt now use the Hafs text in 1936, 89 years ago. That became so successful, everybody using one text to memorize, that the Saudi Arabian government in 1985 took the Hafs text, called it the Fahd edition, and made it the official Quran for the entire world. For those of you who are listening to me who are over 40 years old, you are older than the official Quran. Boy, that makes you feel old, doesn't it? Now, where did the Quran come from? To know where the Quran came from, you need to start with the Germans. The Germans are way ahead of us. And there's a guy named Gunther Lulling. You can see him pictured there. He's a friend of mine who was doing his doctoral thesis in 1970, and he was looking at the Quran, looking at this beautiful poetry. He said, I've seen that before. So he took all the dots and vowels off that had been introduced in the 8th and 9th century and just looked at the consonantal text and then put Syriac dots and vowels off. And by doing that, he saw that these were all Christian hymns, beautiful Christian hymns written in Syriac. He got the eximum opus, the highest grade you could get, because he was proving that the Quran, much of this beautiful poetry came from Christian hymns. That was such an embarrassment to the Germans that they threw him out of academia in 1972, and he was in obscurity for about 30 years until I met him. We then took his book, his doctoral thesis, made it into a book, sent it to India, got it published, and he became was brought out of seclusion, brought into academia, and he died in 2014, a happy man. Christoph Luxemburg, this man, decided to do one step further. About 25% of the Quran no one understands. Not even the scholars understand. It does not make any sense. So he decided to go, it's called the dark passages. He decided to go into those dark passages, and he did 7 layers. I'm not going to go into all 7 of them, but basically he did what Gunther Lulling did, but even more sophisticated. He took all the dots and the vowels, looked at different dictionaries, went back to the Syriac, and he was able to reproduce all of the 25% that no one can understand. And guess what he found? By taking it back to its Aramaic roots, all the dark passages were Christian lectionaries or Christian homilies or Christian hymns, all to Jesus Christ. It was all about Jesus. It had nothing with what he found, but who he found. So folks, finally, I'm going to end with this because I don't want to go into conclusion. We don't have time. Notice 4 claims that Muslims have made about their authority. The Quran is eternal, sent down, complete, and unchanged. Those are the 4 things I asked you. We pretty well shut that down today, all 4 of them. But we don't make those claims about our Bible. However, there's another word of God that we have. His name is Jesus Christ, the Logos, the word of God who became flesh and dwelt among us. Let's ask those 4 things about Jesus. Is he eternal? Yes, he is. Was he sent down? Yes, he was. Is he complete? Absolutely. Has he ever changed? He's never changed. So the 4 criteria Muslims are looking for in their Quran, which is their primary revelation, we already have in Jesus Christ, our primary revelation. Folks, what we need to do, we need to bring them home to a better book, a better man, and a better place. We don't have a problem with our book. We know it's historically valid. We don't have a problem with Jesus. We can not only find reference after reference after reference to him from outside the biblical account. And we have no problem with Jerusalem. No one doubts that Jerusalem did not exist in the 1st century. Okay, I'm going to end it there. I've gone way over time. And let's see if you have any questions.
Well, hey, let me just jump in here and thank you, Jay. Wow, that was Talk about being fed by a fire hose. I thought our classes were packed. This was really packed. We are a bit over time, but I'm sure there's people that want to ask some questions. So Jay, if you have a few more minutes to hang in with us, that would be great. Let me
Most to go, but I'll stay around to answer questions.
Yeah. So if you need to go, let me just remind you, I've put this in the chat a couple times, but this is all recorded. After we edit it, it'll be up on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So let me begin with the first question, and then the rest of you, if you have questions, just wave your hand or put up your hand signal, and then you can unmute, and I'll call on you. So my question, Jay, is there's actually two. So the first one is, how do people learn more about this? Where would you point them to? Because obviously there's going to be way more questions than we can deal with. So where would they go to learn more about this research? So that's question number one. And then the second question is, generally speaking, what is the Muslim reaction to this?
Okay, good stuff. First, really, we're the only ones that are dealing with this because no one really has gone into the reason why, Ben, is because this has been well known in Germany, but they don't want it outside of Germany. Much of what I'm introducing today has been around for about 100 years. Goldziher, back in the 1920s, was talking about this, about the Qur'an. Schacht in the 1950s was referring to this. The Islamicists, we call them Islamicists, experts of Islam from outside of Islam. I'm an Islamicist. So are you, Ben. We all know about this material, and the Germans have been doing it, and they've been getting together every 2 years in Germany in Saarbrücken at Saarland University. And they actually have papers, but they keep it in German. They don't want it in English because they don't want the English-speaking world to know about it because of all the ramifications of what this means. So that's why they're feeding me this material, and I'm getting it from them. And I'm getting it from also researchers. I have 7 researchers who are doing the research. So we're the only ones that are doing it. Interestingly, of the 7 researchers, every one of them, not one of them is an evangelical Christian. They're mostly Catholics. Isn't that interesting? The ones I have to use are Catholics. They seem to understand this much better than the Protestants do. So I'm grabbing them and using them, and they're putting it together. So there's really no one else outside of us who's doing it yet. But that's why we're trying to get it out to as many people as possible, because you can see how damaging this is. Now, the second question, what are Muslims doing? They're absolutely saying not a thing. I'm getting no attacks. No one wants to debate me. Even when I challenged them to a debate, I was supposed to be in South Africa to do a debate. I said, okay, I'm not going to debate on the Trinity. You've done that so many times. Let's debate something that always, rather than being on the defensive, let's go on the offense. I'm going to ask you a question. Can you prove that there was a man named Muhammad in the 7th century, that there was a book called the Qur'an in the 7th century, and that there was a place called Mecca in the 7th century? Just those 3 questions. Let's debate that. They would not. They could not, because they saw exactly what I've come up with. How would you debate this? See, put yourself in their shoes. You can't debate this. It's undebatable. It's as if I were to tell you right now, Ben, that I pretty much can prove from the 1st century there was nobody named Jesus Christ. He did not exist in the 1st century. You're not going to find not one reference to him. You're not going to find, there is no Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John we now know actually lived in the 4th and 5th century, and they lived way up in Turkey. They redacted everything they knew about this man named Jesus Christ back to the 1st century, and they put it in a place called Jerusalem, which never existed. It would not exist for another 100 years. How would you defend that? Well, you could defend it quite easily, because there's lots of references to Jesus outside Tacitus, Phlegon. You have Josephus, you have Suetonius, you have so many people referring to Jesus. You have so many people referring to the crucifixion and to Jerusalem. We can do that. But if you could not defend either Jesus or Jerusalem or the documents about him, if you could not do one of those until the 4th century, how would you defend him? How would you debate him? That's why they don't. So far, I've not seen any. The best I have seen is by Sheikh Farid. In fact, he's the one that actually is confronting me on the extant manuscripts. And he's saying, no. We have extant manuscripts that exist from the 7th century itself, from the Sahaba. And I'm going to shut that down. That I haven't put up yet. That's going to go up because he's never dated them. Muslims don't date anything. It's not healthy to debate them, to date them. If a Muslim starts dating them, they're going to have death threats. So that's why, in some ways, no Muslim yet has responded to it. I'm waiting for them to respond. Listen, you can see me. I've been as public as you can get. Look and see what I did. Look and see what I did in 2014, 11 years ago when I did that debate in Toronto. That's gone to over 1 million people. And we know of at least 100 people have given their lives to Jesus Christ because of that one debate. Since 2014, who has confronted me on those manuscripts? Who's been able to do so? The one man that was commissioned to do that in 2018, the Muslim, he left Islam within 2 hours after watching that debate, and he's now become a Christian. He's now one of my colleagues. I can't tell you his name. He's known all over the internet as Adam Seeker. Look at Adam Seeker. Look at what he's doing. So even when Muslims try to confront it, they usually fall. They can't, because this is much too damaging, because it requires evidence from the century. Okay, I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Hey, we had a couple hands raised. They put them down again, but Jill, did you have a question? Jill Miller? No. All right. Johnson, you have your hand back up again. So go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thanks, Ben. Hope you can all get me.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, so just one, thanks, Dr. J, for that presentation. It was outstanding. But my question is just, there is a debate going on the relocation of the Mount Sinai, and it's usually now being written about that it is allegedly the original location would be in Saudi Arabia. And with what you've presented today, I'm suspecting another fraudulent propaganda. So what do you say about that?
I know what you're talking about, and I had to do a debate on this in London way back almost 15 years ago, more than that, maybe 20 years ago. There are two things I could say. I don't the material that they're using to show for that, the wheels that are down underneath the Gulf of Aqaba. I don't think that would have they would have existed since the time of Moses. You're talking about 3,400 years. There would be no evidence for it that even today. The other problem is I don't have a difficulty if you're going to say that it is the Gulf of Aqaba. Look and see where the Gulf of Aqaba is. That goes over to what is northern Arabia and Jordan, where the Gibeonites are. So that would be I would have no problem if it's that far north, but it's not. When you say Saudi Arabia, it's not Saudi Arabia, Johnson. There was no Saudi Arabia back at the time of Moses. Saudi Arabia is its modern day name, and there was Northern Arabia, which would be the Nabatean world, which would make more sense to me. If they're coming across the Gulf of Aqaba, they're going right into where the Neom project is, over to Tabuk, and then on up to what is today Petra. So that's way up in the north again. That's, again, 600 miles too far north. Okay?
All right. Hey, Brendan has his hand up. Go ahead and unmute Brendan and ask your question.
Hi, very great lecture. I'm also a Veritas student. I had a question for you. I do have some friends here from Pakistan that have those blasphemy laws. What would be something really simple that they could do to share this type of information while navigating those difficult culture that they live in? Do they just refer them to some of your videos, or how do they tiptoe around those laws?
Yes, and they need to tiptoe, Brendan. This is not something that you use in Pakistan. It is not for them to do that publicly. That's why the videos are so important, because the fact that we have videos in YouTube is available. They can just point them to that. Polemics, by definition, should not be used in places like Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia, and places where you can get thrown out, or in for Pakistan, you can actually be killed. So that's why I do not support it. Now, that's not to say they can't use it, because they don't even have to actually say it. They just point to the video, say, "What do you think about this?" And takes it off their shoulders and puts it onto my shoulders. And they're not going to do anything against me, other than they're not going to let me into the country, which I'm not allowed to anyways. So that's not any grief off my back. But the other thing is this. We're finding, Brendan, that an awful lot of the polemics that we have used is what's causing an awful lot of anger. When you start confronting Muhammad and you start confronting his character, his misogyny, or his violence, it's like a slap in the face to Muslims. And what tends to happen is they get angry and they just shut the door. And you can't. The conversation is lost. That's why people don't like to use polemic, because that's the only polemics we've had in the past, is confronting Muhammad, his character. And most Muslims don't have a problem with his character. We have a problem with his character because he's not like Jesus. Okay? When we're confronting Muhammad, we're actually looking at Jesus. And this is a Christian polemic. Really, for Muslims, they don't have a problem that he bedded 9-year-old girls. Any prophet should be able to do so. They have no problem that he killed everybody that stood in his way. Good, that's a good a leader of men. They have no difficulty that he was, they have no difficulty that he was seduced by Satan. He didn't end up seduced by Satan. Look and see what happened next. He then overcame the seduction. They have no problem that he had suicidal thoughts. He didn't commit suicide. Every prophet has these crises that they overcome, and they look at it completely different than we do. We say, "Oh, how could he be a prophet? He does this. How could he prophet and be suicidal? How could he prophet and have these evil thoughts?" Every prophet has these evil thoughts. Many of them are suicidal, but they didn't succumb to it. That's what they keep on reminding us. So would you stop calling him a difficult? In fact, he's a much greater prophet than Jesus. Jesus never had a family. Jesus never went to war. Jesus was never a leader. He never did anything that I expect to do. And therefore, he's not a good model for me. So they'll throw it right back in your face. And that's been our problem. We've been using that map paradigm over and over again, and we're shutting down doors, and we're actually making their point for them. They would much prefer Muhammad to Jesus because Muhammad's a lot more practical. And Muhammad is really a leader of men where Jesus was never. And he knows all about family problems and all about wives because Jesus never had a wife or had a family. So why is he a model is what they keep telling me. This material, though, the other thing is that shuts it down because it's like a slap, like we're making fun of him, or like what David Wood does. He even mocks it. And or Hatun Tash, my colleague, she mocks it. When you mock Muhammad or you mock the Quran, you shut down and you get them angry. Why mock them? Just stop it. Don't do it. But more than that, have I mocked and have I said anything that's mocking in the last hour and a half? Have I said anything that's hateful? Have I said anything that you can claim is Islamophobic? Bingo. Not a thing. That's why suddenly now I don't get any hate mail. I'm getting no more death threats. And I'm invited into all kinds of places I've never been invited to. So I would suggest that this is probably the best thing to use in Pakistan, but not by you and not by Christians. It is for them to point to, and that's why the YouTubes is important. They can point to the YouTube and say, what do you think this guy's come up with? Do you have an answer to this? Just put it out there as a question and let them deal with it. I mean, that's what happened to Adam Seeker. He was in Pakistan when this all happened, and he left Islam within 2 hours just watching one video. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, we have two more hands. We're gonna close it off with those. So Sharu, ask your quick question, and then Hani, you can go after that. So go for it, Sharu.
Hey, Dr. J, thank you for doing the presentation. Thanks, Ben, for doing this. I have a specific question. So you mentioned Ibn Hisham wrote the Sirah of the Prophet, and Ibn Hisham kind of wrote it from him. Where do you get the idea that he threw out a lot of the sayings and he wrote his own thing? Where do you get that idea? Like
the Muslim traditions say that itself, and Muslims they say that much of what Ibn Ishaq wrote he didn't keep because he didn't think it was relevant, and they threw out and only left what we have. So I mean, this is typical of anybody. If you have someone who's written the Sirah, though he's quoting a guy named Ibn Ishaq, then where's Ibn Ishaq? Why doesn't he have all of Ibn Ishaq there and just redo it? The fact that there is no Ibn Ishaq is because that had been destroyed. So it's obvious when you destroy something, it's because you want to censor it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, Hani, you get the last question here. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Dr. J. Thank you for this excellent presentation. As you can see, I look like an Arab, and so I was so edified by what you're saying. I'm from a Christian background. We are having all kinds of questions regarding our faith, including textual criticism and what's the original authenticated Greek manuscript or Greek text that we take our New Testament translations from. Is it the Textus Receptus? And obviously the textual critics are helping the Muslims in their in spreading their religion. But my question specifically here is, do we have any archaeological evidence for the word of Allah used by Christians before the Islamic era?
Yes, we do. Allah is well known in Nabatean script. And remember, we're talking about northern Arabia. There's no manuscripts at all coming from middle Arabia. There's nothing at all coming from Mecca or Medina, the Hijaz. So when you say Arabia, you're talking about the north. And this is something that people get confused by. when Arabia was given its name by the Romans in the second century A.D., and they talked about three Arabias. An Arabia that they refer to that where the Arabic language comes from that we use today, that is known as Arabia Petraea. Petra was the capital of it, which is in Jordan today. It's all in what is today Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and also Lebanon and Israel. That would be Arabia Petraea. That's the Arabic that you find in the Quran. The Quranic Arabic is that Arabic. It's got the Alif Maksura, it's got the Tar Marbuta, it has the definite article, Al. That is found in the Quran, but that only comes from that northern part up in what is Jordan today. So when you say Arabia, you're talking about, for any historical evidence for it, the Arabs there. Now, the Nabatean Aramaic, the name for God is Ilaha. The name for God is Ilaha. Ilaha is what Allah comes from, and it just means the God. It's generic. So Ilaha, when you that's with the vowels. When you take that off, you're just left with no aleph. The aleph was introduced at a later time once they had the vowels. Once they introduced, then you have the long vowel the dagar aleph as well. When the original Ilaha is all over scripts in Nabatean material. It's all over manuscripts. I'm sorry, not manuscripts, inscriptions on the rocks. You can see it on those rocks that I showed you. Ilaha, Ilaha. So Ilaha is the Allah that we use today. But here's what's interesting, honey. The Ilaha from which Allah comes from has a name. His name is Dushara. So Ilah is his title, much like Mahmud is the title. Ilaha is actually a title, the God. And that's what it is in Arabic too, isn't it? It means the God.
Yeah.
So what's the name of the God? What's his name? Bingo. You don't have a name, do you?
Jesus. Just a title, eh?
Well, see, we know the name of God. His name is Yahweh. That's what Moses in Exodus 3, right?
Elohim.
Elohim is the closest you can get to Allah. Elohim would be the equivalent in Hebrew, and it's plural, three or more. Elohim is the name, generic title for God. Yahweh is his name. So when you ask a Muslim, where does Allah come from? Then you need to say, well, it comes from the Nabateans. But here's what really gets interesting. The Ilaha of the Nabateans, his name is Dushara. That's his name. But Dushara has a wife named Al-Uzza. Her title is Ilaha. Alat. Her name is Uzza, and her title is Allah, the goddess. Where have you heard that before, honey?
Lat al-Uzza and Manat al-Salisa.
Where is that? It's in the Quran, chapter 53, verse 19 and 20. That's the satanic verses.
The satanic verses, yeah, right, which were abrogated.
But listen to you see what I've just said, honey. Don't stick to this argument. How can Allah, Ilaha, who is Allah, who's Dushara, have a wife if he's one? Bingo. So even the satanic verses is much more damaging because it shows that the God that they're supporting, the God that they believe is the eternal God, which is just a generic title, he has a wife, which means he cannot be the eternal God. How can God have a wife? Look at chapter 6, verse 101 in the Quran. Allah can have a wife. Woo, I love that. So take that one step further, and you can just shut this down just by using historical critique again. And what have I just done is I've used textual criticism there.
Yeah. So the short answer to the question is go to one of the inscriptions that you showed us in the video for the word Allah. But
honey, be careful. Be careful. Be careful. Allah was the Arabic name for God, like English, God is the name for God in English. Everybody, the Jews used it, the Christians used it, the Zoroastrian used it in Arabic. In Arabic, Allah was the generic title. So they all use it.
I was looking for an inscription for that because we were told that by other Christians that we are worshiping the Islamic God whose name is Allah.
No, you're not. This is why you need to be careful. This is why, honey, the argument is that, and this is a difficulty that we have today because most Muslims claim that the Allah is unique to Islam. No, it wasn't. It was used by. And the other thing is, be careful. The much more damaging one is Issa. What is Issa doing there? It's not even Arabic. For Jesus.
Issa is close to Isus in Greek.
But what is the name for Jesus in Arabic? What has always been the name for Jesus in Arabic? It's not Issa.
You see, in the old manuscripts, in the old
All
Arabic
the old
manuscripts
manuscripts. What's the name for Jesus?
from the 10th century, it's translated Isa, and on the top of the Gospel of Matthew manuscript, it says Bismillah ar-Rahman Rahim. That's a 10th
You need to
century
go to the
manuscript in
earliest.
Arabic.
You need to go to the earliest Arabic manuscript of the New Testament. It's called the Codex Sinaiticus 151. It's still in St. Catherine's Monastery. It is dated to 868. That's the 9th century. That's the earliest Arabic New Testament we have. It's still in existence. And look at the name for Jesus in 868 in Arabic. It's Yeshua. It's always been Yeshua in Arabic. So where did this come from? Okay. Anyway, we could go on all day with this.
So I'm going to jump in and wrap us up here. Obviously, this topic is so exciting, and for many of us, it's kind of new. So I would encourage everybody to, if you want to learn more, which I'm sure you do, is just my source is to go on YouTube, and if you type in Jay Smith or Flander Films, you'll find just a wealth of this information. And so that's a great source.
Yeah, and Pfander Films is spelled with Pfander. Pfander. It's the German spelling named after Dr. Karl Pfander, who's my hero.
Amen. And there's been a lot of requests in the chat for resources. So number one, just a reminder that the recording of this will be posted. And I think, Jay, you said that you were willing to share the PowerPoint of this.
I'll send it to your email.
Yeah, send it to my email, and then anybody who wants a copy of that can contact me. Also, we do have a lot of other resources that are more primary deep research work that has been done on these topics, and I'm happy to share some of that with you. So just connect with me. I posted my email. You can always get to us via our website at apologeticsonmission.org. So with that, Dr. Smith, it's been an incredible joy. We set a couple records here. Number one, I think it was one of our, if not the top, but one of the top attended AOM talks we've had. So clearly there's an interest in this topic. And number two, I think we've gone longer than any other AOM talk simply because we just want to keep going here. But we want to respect your time and everybody else's time. So with that, let me pray and then close us out. So Lord Jesus, thank you so much that you are the source of truth. You are the truth. And Lord, we can discover that truth when we discover you. And everything else that is against you is not the truth. And Lord, thank you for revealing through these great teachings that Dr. Jay has put together, revealing the falsity of Islam. May we be able to understand this. May we be able to use it in service to your kingdom, spreading your gospel, spreading your truth. So thank you again for this technology. Thank you for my brothers and sisters around the world. And Lord, may you just lead us in how we are to use this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Smith. It's been a great joy and pleasure.
Thanks so much, PMO, for that great opportunity. Amazing. It's totally.
All right.
Bye-bye.
And Jay, I'll see you Monday.
Monday. Bye-bye.